Let's continue our journey through the darker side of animation with the Disney Channel. Looking for dark episodes in the Disney Channel can be a bit like looking for boogeymen in your closet. Most of the time, the worst you're going to find is dust bunnies and embarrassing pajama shorts. But occasionally, Disney can take on some pretty heavy themes. Rather than focusing on outright violence, they may focus more on abstract concepts like the twisting of the mind. Heroes may become brainwashed, or worse yet, they may willingly decide to become evil.
Looks like it's the chair for you, my ex-compadre.
So let's check out the top 6 darkest Disney Channel episodes. And just a heads up, there may be some spoilers for the episodes we're going to talk about. Anyway, on to the countdown. Number 6. Phineas and Ferb. Phineas and Ferb get busted. Well, this is certainly the darkest Phineas and Ferb episode, but it's at the start of the list because although the concept is brutal, the tone's kept pretty upbeat, despite the fact that we're watching Phineas and Ferb losing all their creativity and individuality. The military boot camp process of reshaping people, de-individualizing them, and molding into them an unwavering devotion to their military commanders can be an unsettling concept.
Our goal at this school is to crush the dangerous elements inside you and replace them with structure, order, discipline, and conformity.
And that is much of the process we see happening to Phineas and Ferb here. They even throw a Clockwork Orange reference in for good measure. Look it up, you'll never think of Beethoven the same again.
The book was so much better.
Of course, even when we're watching Phineas and Ferb get their minds warped through heavy military regime and losing everything that made them who they are, they somehow still manage to keep a lighthearted tone. And to top it off, Phineas and Ferb have their minds restored by Candace at the end, and they go back to their old creative selves. But then it turns out the entire sequence was merely a dream, thoroughly destroying all attempts at executing any high stakes or conceptual darkness that was originally there. But hey, introducing kids to the concept of military brainwashing is still a very brave step for Disney. And although it's a dark concept, it's still just as high quality as any other Phineas and Ferb episode, with plenty of good jokes to offset the darkness. And for number 5, Toffee, Star versus the Forces of Evil. Well, this is a bit more like it. Despite his candy-flavored name, Toffee is actually an ancient immortal lizard monster with no sense of remorse or empathy, treating creatures' lives more like business transactions. And much of this episode is about when he seemingly killed Star right in front of Moon and Marco. Toffee isolates Star in an empty world of blackness, trapping her in the void for all eternity, as Toffee's body is reanimated bone by bone. With Star seemingly dead, Moon vainly attempts to kill the vile lizard that murdered her child. Marco even strikes a clean hole through Toffee's heart, only for his flesh to regenerate. Toffee is seemingly invincible. We see Star fiercely fighting against the waves until she loses her breath, leaving Star to drown within an empty void of nothingness. We get to see a lot of grief here and how Marco and Moon handle Star's death. Seeing Star's mother desperately trying to piece the ashes of the wand back together in a futile attempt to bring her daughter back to life is a particularly rough moment, but touching, and I really did empathize with Moon's grief. But then, for some reason, Star wakes up to Glossaric making soup.
Oh, knock it off!
Less salt? More salt? More salt.
I guess he saved her from drowning? And then, for some reason, Star dips her hand down in the boiling soup and makes a new wand from it. Hooray! We're given a happy end as Star transforms into an ascended Muni form and demolishes Toffee off with a death ray. Though his mutilated corpse still has a few key words to say.
You think you've won?
Only I know how this all turns out.
Before being crushed by Ludo. All's well that ends in a bloody black pool of bile, I suppose. And for number 4, Darkwing Duck, Time and Punishment. There are a few more shaking, powerful moments in a cartoon for me than when the hero willingly decides to become the villain. Not even through mind manipulation. They just decide, well, maybe being decent isn't all it's cracked up to be. And that's just what we see happen to Darkwing Duck here. After his daughter Goslin disappears forward in time, he loses all of his sanity and goes on to create a dictatorship where every criminal is given the death penalty.
He said I was too soft on crime. Just because I thought we should arrest crooks before giving them the electric chair.
One of the interesting themes in this one is about the love between a father and a daughter. In this case, Darkwing and Goslin. And the question, could Darkwing ever become insane enough to ever hurt or even kill his daughter?
Protecting St. Canard is a tough job. The old Darkwing Duck couldn't hack it. That's when Dark Warrior Duck came to town.
After Goslin's thrown forward in time into this twisted dystopian future, she desperately attempts to escape back in time, but soon she's held at gunpoint by her father, now Dark Warrior Duck.
I should have recognized you as a bad egg from the start. You never cleaned your room, never helped with the dishes, never did well in school.
Dark Warrior's plans is to go back in time to completely restructure world history with his iron glove. But just as he's about to murder his own daughter, he manages to restrain himself.
But I just can't do it.
And is, thank Jeebus, promptly knocked out by Launchpad. So Goslin and the villains get to escape, well, the hero of the show. What's powerful to me about this is that Darkwing Duck lost the one thing that mattered more to him than anything in the world, his daughter Goslin. And in his grief, he stops seeing value in everything else in the world.
Dad, you're obsessing.
I really found this episode beautiful. Time and Punishment covers some dark, unpleasant concepts, but treats the subject seriously. It's also a pleasant reminder that there are some parts of who we are that no grief, disillusionment, or hatred can ever change.
You are grounded for a month.
No problem, Dad. That kind of justice I can handle.
Now don't argue with me.
And the third darkest Disney Channel episode is Weirdmageddon, Gravity Falls.
You've tricked me for the last time!
Well, Disney gave us the weird version of the apocalypse. In the three-part finale of Gravity Falls, Bill Cipher unleashes his full-scale apocalypse on the town and reality itself.
I could really use a castle of some kind! And how about some bubbles of pure madness?
After he traps Mabel in a bubble manifestation of her personal utopia, we see Bill completely warp the fabric of reality, time, society, people, animals, and just every status quo law in existence. In fact, even the cartoon's intro is not safe from Bill's influence. We're suddenly confronted with a more distorted and apocalyptic intro where everything's slightly off and kinda creepy. Throughout the episodes, we see Cypher's deranged dystopia in all its detail, from interdimensional demons running rampant to a giant throne of the paralyzed bodies of Cypher's victims. Frankly, Cypher's Weirdmageddon truly earns its namesake, if nothing else, and Bill Cipher himself always functions as an erratic time bomb. One minute he's laughing and sounding like he's ready for a pleasant afternoon tea. The next he's turning everything the characters love into stone, creating dimensions of insanity and annihilating the world. The darkness of this trilogy is balanced well.
Everyone has a weakness, tough guy.
Never lingering for too long, as Mabel and Dipper generally remain safe throughout, and we're consistently reassured with jokes and some heartwarming character moments. But we're still regularly cutting back to the unfiltered chaos within the town. And there's a real sense of terror when the townspeople are transformed, paralyzed, or mutilated. While Mabel, Dipper, and Stan do manage to outsmart this dimensional horror in the end, Weirdmageddon was the darkest moment of Gravity Falls, and many fans of the show remember it vividly and fondly. And the second darkest Disney Channel episode is Star vs. the Forces of Evil, St. Olga's Reform School for Wayward Princesses. Whose idea was it to make a title that long anyway? It feels like I wasted half the review just announcing the title. Anyway, the Reform School for Princesses has always stood out in the Star vs. universe for being a surprisingly somber, militaristic-style correctional center, aimed at removing any free thought and individuality.
That free-thinking 1 in a million brats will become a 1 of a million emotionless rubber stamp that your bloodline can count on.
It basically took on the form I'd expect from a concentration camp of forceful reconditioning, prison walls, dreary dark rooms, and continual messaging being forced into the minds of its inmates. Lines of inmates repeating mindless mantras as all signs of creativity and individuality are sucked out of them.
Keep your pinkies at 90 degrees. More tea, please. Keep your pinkies at
This is worse than my worst nightmare. Yeah.
So Star and Marco take it upon themselves to overthrow this oppressive regime. It's a great commentary on the forced gender roles placed on each person in society, and how subtly they can begin to affect us without us even knowing it. While it takes Marco a while to pick up on the revolting manipulation going on here, it's very clear to Star from the start.
Don't you see what's going on here? Dancing?
But soon, Marco's the one to start a riot among the princesses.
Come on! It's not criminal to be an individual!
It's not criminal to be an individual.
Even exploring gender roles a little himself.
Are they gonna let me keep the dress?
Wayward Princesses is a dark but magnificent episode and encourages people to fight back and overthrow these proper traditions.
Okay, Marco, I conquered my biggest fear and grew as a person. Yada, yada, yada. Let's get out of here and never come back.
And before we get to number one, just a couple of quick honorable mentions. For those who don't know, the honorable mentions either didn't quite make it or were suggested by fans a lot, and I try my best to justify each one and why they didn't make it on the list. Wander Over Yonder, Black Cube. I don't know, this one was recommended a lot. And I admit it has some dark elements. I mean, this cube has a horrible life, and it turns from being evil to good, but ultimately is hated at every turn because it's a soul-sucking cube. But the song that plays at the sad moment, and Wanda just coming in throughout the episode, kinda sucks all the darkness out. And the rudeness of the townsfolk just, well, made me more angry than sad. Overall, I didn't really consider it a dark episode. DuckTales 2017, The Other Bin of Scrooge McDuck. I will take almost any excuse to talk about this amazing series. But even this episode is just another wonderful escapade with Scrooge, Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Webby. The ending is the only kind of dark part, as we see Magica possess Webby, and even completely overtake the body and mind of Lena. Star vs. the forces of evil, Schooled. A lot of Schooled is about the oppressive past of Meteora, the principal of the aforementioned Wayward Princesses School. Raised by a robot named Saint Olga, Meteora was brainwashed from childhood to despise her monster side and learn to be, proper. This episode speaks a lot about generational trauma. Gravity Falls, Northwest Mansion Mystery. In this episode, the Northwest Mansion family is haunted by a ghost, seeking justice for having been double-crossed by the Northwest family, and repeatedly shunned for centuries on end. The episode functions as a solid ghost story, and a very well-handled redemption arc. It also has a really good anti-elitism message. We also get a picture of Pacifica's cold home life, and watch her overcome her elitist upbringing, and become the person she's always wanted to be. Wander Over Yonder, Heebie-Jeebies. Another case where the concept of the episode is especially dark, but the upbeat Disney tone and execution waters it down considerably. And I'm certainly not saying that's a bad thing, but for this list, it relegates an otherwise enjoyable episode to an honorable mention. Anyway, on to number one. And the number one darkest Disney Channel episode is Gargoyles, Deadly Force. And here we have one of the few Disney Channel episodes to ever get outright banned, since it tried to address gun violence to children, in a very respectful way in my opinion. But I guess overprotective parents might have complained too much. No, let's let them learn about gun violence from Call of Duty. That'll be better. I used to catch up on Gargoyles on Disney Channel pretty rarely, but if I were to define it, it kinda reminds me of a more Disney version of Batman the Animated Series. Our gargoyle friend Broadway decides to visit his friend Elisa after catching a popular action movie at a nearby theater. As Elisa's in the kitchen making them a nice dinner, Broadway spots Elisa's gun hanging in its hilt on the coat rack. He carelessly starts aiming the gun at random points in the room.
Let's go, Pilgrim, and don't forget the horse.
The scene rapidly takes a turn for the worse as he starts fiddling with the trigger and accidentally fires the gun. The whole scene happens in barely 10 seconds, yet that deafening sound of gunfire and the ensuing silence of the scene is enough to sink the heart. But then seeing Elisa, the seemingly indestructible cop, shot and lying lifeless on the ground in a small pool of blood, is about as confronting and unpleasantly realistic as I've ever seen Disney Channel get. Broadway frantically drops Elisa off at the hospital, but the paramedics can't get a pulse. We're given small tidbits of information from where the bullet struck her to how long the surgery was. As Elisa is one of the main characters, it's surprisingly shocking to spend much of the episode uncertain of whether she's dead or not by the hands of one of the heroes. What I think is interesting here is we're given a realistic depiction of the extensive, disastrous damage one bullet can do to a person. It's not like Elisa was just shot through the shoulder.
The bullet hit high on the chest, ricocheted off the collarbone, nicked the heart muscle, and passed through the right lung.
Surviving 10 hours of surgery to get the bullet out of being lodged in her spine. Anyway, eventually after extensive surgery, Elisa does start to show signs of movement, but she's completely drained and weakened, much like a real gunshot victim probably would be in this situation when recovering. Honestly, I'm disappointed but not surprised this episode was banned. This episode doesn't speak down to kids on a very serious issue. It doesn't sugarcoat very real gun violence. Kids should be allowed to know that if a gun is fired, the results can be catastrophic. You might think this sounds silly, but I think the kind of impact this episode could have on a child could have inadvertently saved a life. The dangers of guns are very, very real, and kids should be aware of that, because they're the ones who have to grow up to face that gun violence. The entire episode was written and animated very meticulously, so that it could follow the real-life scenario of a gunshot victim. The creators of this show knew they had to be brave to send an important message, and it was spineless of Disney to pull it, and I'm very disappointed in them. But either way, at least you and I know about it now, and I consider it very realistically dark, but also important, detailed, and respectful. I consider it the darkest Disney Channel episode. And what I appreciate about all these episodes is I knew at the end of the day, Disney would handle all these subjects seriously and with respect, but they'd also make the message digestible to kids. They balance the humor in, they balance the characters in. And I personally think there are a few subjects we can't discuss with one another, but it's also a matter of how we say it, and having compassion and empathy behind what we do say. And if you think I missed a particularly dark Disney Channel episode, feel free to mention it in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.